In episode 2, we reviewed the heading, background, and current conditions sections, providing tips for each. In this episode, we'll review the goal, analysis, and countermeasures sections. To recall, we are using a problem-solving template to guide our discussion throughout the video series. The goal or target conditions that the author is striving towards can be located in different places in the storyboard based on the starting point of the effort. We mentioned in episode 1 that sometimes the goal is known at the outset of the effort. Other times, the goal is defined after grasping current conditions. The storyboard should represent what is really happening. Wherever it is, the goal should be specific and measurable. It is against which the actual condition will be compared during the check stage of PDCA. Goals or targets should not be expressed in terms as shown here. A 20% reduction in defects is not specific enough. A one-to-one comparison to actual quality performance cannot be made. A more specific expression of a rate of defects should be provided. The goal or target should also include any conditions by which the goal will be met. I have seen where the pursuit of a measurable goal has come at the expense of other process characteristics. Here are just 2 examples of possible conditions. Process changes can be made, but the effort must work with the existing business system. Second example states that throughput goal must be met with existing staffing. The author cannot simply throw bodies at the problem. Another condition that must be part of any goal is the time by which it will be met. Does the author have 2 weeks or 2 years to reach the goal? It is important to define this up front. There may be important business reasons to reach a goal by a particular point in time. All of the conditions represent boundaries to the problem-solving or process improvement effort. Now, you might think that such boundaries squelch creativity, but actually it has the opposite effect. For example, the countermeasures that are identified with a goal 2 weeks out will be quite different from countermeasures for a goal 2 years out. It is important for the author to understand these boundaries before they get too far into the process, specifically countermeasures. Coming up with countermeasures that are impractical is going to have quite the opposite effect that we are hoping for by practicing the A3 storyboard process. Some other tips for the goals section. The goal should not include countermeasures or process changes that will be made. I see this quite often on storyboards. Similarly, it should not include steps that will be taken. The goal is the measurable destination against which actual conditions will be compared during the check of PDCA. How else will we answer the important question, are we there yet? Next, we will review the analysis section, which is part of a problem-solving storyboard. By analysis, we mean analysis of potential root causes of the problem. The results of a 5 why analysis should be included here, as perhaps a cause and effect diagram that may have been created. If some experimentation was conducted to verify a cause or causes, the results of the experiments would be included here. Analysis of data to understand current condition is not to be included. That should be placed in the current condition section. This is a common point of confusion that I have seen. If it is a process improvement storyboard, there is really no problem statement and therefore no potential root causes. Instead, the title for this section might be Obstacles instead of Analysis. Obstacles would mean potential impediments to the goals or targets that have been set. The author can make a list of those in this section. You hear that I keep emphasizing the term potential root causes or potential obstacles. The author must maintain objectivity and not be too quick to assume that a cause is a cause. At this point, only hypotheses can be formulated. No one really knows for sure that a cause is a cause until it has been thoroughly investigated, a countermeasure applied, and the effects of which assessed. A tip I'd like to point out here involves proper practice of the 5 whys. Too often, I see people try to answer each why immediately, sort of like rapid fire. Actually, more investigation should take place after each why. It should be why, go see, why, go see, why, go see, and so on. I also commonly see human error identified as a root cause. This is not a root cause. There is a reason that a person was able to make the error. This must be considered. Simply saying human error is really just being lazy. Additional investigation is required to understand what in the process allowed that error to be created. In addition, the lack of a lean tool is not a cause. For example, no standard work is not a cause. What really occurred that must be taken into account in standard work, which is a countermeasure. I often see the listing of lean tools, or the lack of, as causes. And I always have to coach the authors that those are not causes, but rather countermeasures. And the lack of are not causes. Still, another tip is to involve other members of the organization at this point in order to get different perspectives and suggestions, which would be very helpful in understanding all the potential causes. As we discussed in both episodes 1 and 2, there is always the potential for a story to give rise to additional storyboards, what we call baby A3s. It can happen in the current conditions section if multiple problems of significance are identified. It is also possible here in the analysis stage, if multiple substantial categories of causes are identified. If it is desired to address multiple causes concurrently, perhaps involving multiple authors and teams, then baby A3s will probably be necessary. Next, we will discuss the countermeasure section. It is here where process changes to address the identified root causes are listed. A tip to consider here is that for more complicated problems, there is usually more than one root cause. Therefore, there should be more than one countermeasure. Too often, I see practitioners hang their hat on a single solution that they believe will solve a problem completely. That's often just naive. And finally, as always, others in the organization should be involved at this stage in order to get the best ideas out with regard to countermeasures. It is also important to involve people at this point in order to better ensure buy-in in the changes that will soon be made. No one likes to be surprised when changes are being made. So communication at this point is very important. It is here that lean tools should be considered as they represent countermeasures to problems or process changes to achieve higher levels of performance. In all cases, pilots or experiments should be considered when implementing countermeasures. This is a wise tip to verify the effectiveness of a process change before fully implementing it. Dr. Deming always stated that to do a PDCA should be considered an experiment. Only once a process change has been proven effective should it become the new standard. After all, nothing should be assumed. It is why we like to emphasize the term try-storming rather than simply brainstorming. You learn more by doing than just identifying a solution and assuming that it will be effective. This brings episode 3 to a close. To review a few key points, number 1, goals or targets should be located on the storyboard to reflect the actual flow of the story. Goals and targets must be specific, measurable, and bound in time, and also identify any other key conditions. As we mentioned, key conditions form the boundaries to the effort and will result in more practical countermeasures. Number 3, analysis refers to potential root cause analysis, not analysis of data to understand current conditions. The identification of root causes is an often overlooked step. People skip over it completely in their rush to get to a solution. And that's why it warrants its own section on the storyboard. Number 4, countermeasures should be considered as hypotheses that must be tested. No one knows for sure that a proposed solution or countermeasure will be effective until it's tried out and the impact assessed through some measurable means. I hope that you found the information provided helpful here in episode 3. In the next and final episode, we will cover the plan and follow-up sections with additional tips provided for each. We will also provide some follow-up tips that you also might find helpful. I hope that you will join us.